calling the meeting to order at 6:02. I have a few adds. I'm adding in under new business C and D. I'm adding a quick first review of some policies the policy committee worked on. Dog policy and facility use, and then I'm adding a quick VSBA update. I'm also under recognition of visitors. I'm just going to clarify some statutory requirements about Robert's rules under that heading. And I have a request from a student who would like to speak about the Sustainability Council very briefly. And so while we're holding all of the public comment to the end, in the interest of making sure our students get to bed before, say, 11 o'clock, as the meeting sometimes may go to the end, if it's acceptable to the board, I will add that bit of public comment under the Sustainability Council because it is a relevant agenda item. And I'm getting nods. So with that said, I would moving on to the clerk's report, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of 8/7.
So moved.
Is there a second? Who moved that? Was that Ann?
I did, but somebody else did.
I'll call that Ann move that, and then is there a second on that?
Policies.
Second. Thank you, Emily, for seconding that. Any discussion?
Christina,
Yes.
it looks like we still don't have a secretary.
Right.
And I think I've run out of patience with we're a $54 million organization and 700 people on our staff. I think maybe somebody's going to have to be assigned to come until we find another solution. Somebody that has those skills and is not, on a contract. Somebody's got to, we have to have somebody doing it. We don't have Tim in our meetings. And it's time. We have to find another solution if hiring somebody for the days work.
So we actually have a motion to approve the minutes. So can we get through that and then take that business up? Just keep it going. I just want to get the minutes approved and then so I don't lose track of that as my first order of actual business, and then we'll talk about.
Okay.
We'll hear from Lyle if there's anything.
Well, we can put it on the next agenda too.
Yes, that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah,
I've been
I didn't expect to solve it now. It has to change.
I noticed that there's some names missing, I think, that were here, so I will add, and I kind of made a list of them, so I'll forward those to you,
Okay.
Tim.
Okay.
I think the sheet is there a sheet going around tonight? Okay, so if somebody could get a sheet going around so people could sign in and just say their name so we can make sure we get all the visitors tonight, that would be super helpful. Any other changes to the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes of 8/7, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes have it, the ayes have it. The minutes are approved with the changes that I will email to Tim. Recognition of visitors. There's a sign-in sheet going around, and so we are required to know who attended the meeting from the public, so if you could please make sure you sign in at some point. And if somebody comes in late, whoever has the sheet, if you could just sort of pass it along to them, that would be very important. We will be leaving time for public input on every agenda item of the board. Non-agenda discussions will be at the end of the meeting because we have people that have to leave. And if we have scheduling at the end and they have to leave, we can't get our scheduling done. And it's much easier to do it here. There's bathrooms right out there in the hallway. I have copied the board on communications. There were 3 letters from town clerks, 1 parent email about Putney aftercare, 1 David Scholes email, and another parent letter about idling cars. Did anybody have any other communications? So those were all attached or sent to you by me as part of the agenda, part of the backup that I sent this morning. Any other communications? Excellent. We are moving fast today. Moving on to finances. We do not have the chair of our finance committee. The finance committee didn't meet, but Frank is not here, so I think we can say that we can move on with item 5 because there's nothing to report. Am I correct? Excellent. Wow. This might be the fastest meeting ever. So the committee and council reports, the finance committee, as I said, has not met but I did attach the minutes from the meeting that we had prior to the 8/7 board meeting. There's a few items on there that you might want to take a look at in terms of the process of how we're going to be approving warrants. And in Sean's absence, that's pretty much all the Finance Committee has to report. Has the Personnel Committee, which consists of, what's the committee list? Anne, Sean, and Kelly. Have you had a chance to convene yet and choose a chair?
No, I believe you appointed Sean convener.
You're right, I did. So Sean has not convened.
Sean is not
That's
convened.
mistaken.
How convenient that he's not here for the shaming. Okay, I will.
Yeah, I was gonna say, put it on the agenda for Shane next time.
And the Policy and Amendment Committee met, and the minutes, thank you, David, for taking those minutes, were attached to the backup that I sent today. Two of the things that we worked on, the facility use policy that we talked about full meeting last time, and the animal policy, we started to work on policies for that. And I sent you today sort of our first glance at those. We're talking about those later. The Leadership Council policy I still have not gotten back. So I think I think that's still in Barb's hands with some adjustments being made to that. So hopefully we can get that in a format for principals in the next couple of days. But I know you've got kind of a lot on your plate at central office the week before
Yeah,
school
we do.
starts.
We're gonna have to talk about that.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't think I made any changes to what we said.
Okay. We were adding the advisory nature of the leadership councils to that,
I'll check that.
and a suggested ratio
Yeah.
of staff to community members. Was that it?
Yeah, and I communicated that to principals, but I don't think I put it.
Okay.
So, okay.
And we also worked a bit on representation as a group, which I feel like I will be doing that till the day I die somehow. There has been some follow-up today from the Secretary of State, which I got at 4 o'clock. I haven't even had a chance to forward that.
I don't think that's.
I got it.
I just got a call back from Will sending this afternoon, just before coming here. A couple of things, just quick updates, because the committee hasn't really had a chance to talk. One of the questions was about voting on the amendment to add members and voting on the members at the same time. And his recommendation is not to have that happen. Vote on the amendment, and then if the amendment passes, then people run for those slots. He did say that they could not be appointed. The only way you appoint new board members is if there's a vacancy, somebody resigns. So they would have to be elected positions. He also said, depending upon when you have the vote on whether or not to increase the membership, if that's mid-October, then you're looking at end of December to mid-January for an election, and then another election in March. So he suggested we really look at timing that out to see if it even makes sense to have an election in December, January for a position that's going to last maybe 2 months at the most. His other recommendation was around voting. And if we want to do something different with how the ballots are counted, that our attorney should write that into the amendment so it's voted on at the same time as the amendment. I think that's very much so.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I think that was sort of a new concept that you don't have to completely. It sounded like to me, from my very quick read on my smartphone, that we maybe don't have to commingle everything and have things counted separately, that we can have them counted.
But he did say that will be different from what was, what we were directed to do. So he did say that Mark Oppinger should get in touch with him, with Wilson, to talk about how that will work.
Christina,
Yes.
question. Did when they commented on have the election after the amendments passed, were they thinking about in terms of a commingled election? Was that the context they were thinking?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's when he said,
Because it
if
would
you
be
want to
if we did.
change that, put it in the amendment that we're
Right,
voting on.
right. So if we change that, then the election could happen a month later, just in one town.
The new members would still have to run, and they need to have the 6 Mondays. So they have to take
Right.
out their petition, there has to be 6 Mondays. They have to have time to have their petitions signed, then the 6 Mondays. So he was concerned that that's going to put us into December or January.
So it's almost not.
So it's
Yeah.
almost not worth it to
If
have.
that's where we are, it's not.
Right,
to have,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
But if it was just going to be in one town, it would
Right.
be less
Exactly.
difficult.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lyle, for that. So the Policy and Amendment Committee will continue to work on that, but it doesn't sound like we're getting new board members for Christmas. But maybe.
No, but at least we're figuring out how we have to go about it, which we've been struggling with for 3 months now, or 4.
At least.
More. 4 years.
4 years, yeah.
Christine, I
Yes,
have a question. Will those 2 new members be 1-year terms? Because
We have to figure all
we
that
have
out.
to figure all that out.
because if it's more than 1 year,
Everybody
then it
serves,
makes sense to go
Well,
and do it.
yes, that would be something we'd have to talk with our attorney about, because if we're having new members that are filling until a regular election, then it would still only be that 6-week period. But you're right, if it's a 2-year term, then it seems like it would make sense.
The whole term thing is spelled out in statute that we haven't even tackled, Liz, until we kind of knew exactly where we were going and what the vote was going to be. So, like, we wanted to get the big
I'm trying
vision.
to get you help sooner rather than later.
Find us a good minute taker, that would be great. The Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee, which consists of Tim, Emily, David, and Kelly.
We have not met, but we are planning to meet.
So you've scheduled a meeting?
Not exactly, but we have a day in mind.
We almost scheduled one for today.
schedule one. So at the end of this meeting, that committee, of which the whole committee is here, will be scheduling a meeting and warning it
Okay.
through the central office. This is excellent progress. Thank you, Programmatic Performance Equity Committee. Next, the Equity and Diversity Committee, which has met. Congratulations.
Yay! We have
And Beekman, you convener. I believe that was yours to convene. Thank you.
Want to report?
Yeah, I was gonna say, we elected a chair and we had minutes that Dave took. And I have some things that I can't pass out to the public this evening because they're only drafts. When they're in their completed form, they will be posted on the SU website. Everybody can read them. So I guess.
Actually, once they're on the table, they're
Okay,
public.
well,
Yeah, sometimes
they
it's-
asked.
but they're drafts, so you're
Yeah,
not
they're
gonna
drafts.
get, you're not gonna get the whole.
Yeah,
It's just their spelling
Yes.
errors and their grammatical errors.
Okay.
Yeah, entire sentences.
Don't make it
wrong
come
for
back.
We know.
Right.
Educators, school districts have to be careful about their grammar.
Yes.
Yes, they are unedited, but Dave has the minutes here, because he took.
I'll
them
just,
and typed
I'll
them.
hit the highlights. Lyle circulated a document from the annual meeting with the work of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice, which includes a lot of goals and a lot of the plan of work. Lyle's met with the staff, which is Michaela and Judy Dow, and they're here. And they're developing goals, the document that included essential learnings and actions as something else that I'll get to later on. The office is going to develop create a core study group to start conversations going, developing teams in each of the schools to coordinate activities, looking for teacher leader positions in each of the buildings with stipends, which will come to us when there's a proposal. Teacher leaders will meet with the administrators, and Julie and Michaela will be joining administrative meetings to work with them as well. Principals are encouraged to attend all the activities. Talked about the importance of creating an environment that is attractive to hiring and retaining diverse staff. We talked about our committee learning and training and board training, and we're looking at a model that was developed last year, a study group model that we're trying to put together. We're going to think about that, talk about it again, and figure out how to get started at our next meeting. Judy circulated a document regarding work with students, the essential learnings match the standards. She'll be meeting with people, coming up with additional learnings, connecting work with the new state ethnic studies framework. Judy also works with the Gedakina partnership. Gedakina? Gedakina, thank you. The Gedakina partnership, and hopes to create a directive of resources for teachers in the community. All these documents will be posted with the minutes when they're finalized. The curriculum coordinators will be working with processes for engaging and accessing and engaging teachers in this work. And we talked about how are we going to assess our progress, where are we now, looking at our goals from the documents, and then how are we going to measure what we've accomplished, how we consider how we've accomplished over the course of the year. So, productive meeting.
So are you the chair, Dan?
No,
No, I am.
Yes, chair, okay. You
Just-
said you elected a chair.
Yes, the
Yes.
elected chair, it was me, but Dave probably took the minutes and they're on his computer, so I figured it would be easier for him to read them.
So just a question, so when you said the teacher leaders, I was trying to find it on here, I didn't see it, but so the teacher leaders would be at a certain school in all grades, can you repeat that?
I think, yeah.
So, it was one of the things we wanted to make sure we brought to this subcommittee, because in the proposal that we brought forth on January 25th, it was not on our list of what we were thinking we would spend some of the money on. But we have teacher leaders at pretty much every school for literacy and math, and we thought that, actually it was Jerry Curry, the former principal at Oak Grove, who wanted to also have a diversity equity teacher leaders. So that was something that Michaela's been thinking about and developing, so that each school has diversity equity teacher leaders as well, would meet as part of the district diversity equity, maybe be part of the study committee, but it would be their responsibility to take some information back. And those teacher leaders often meet with the administrator in the building, so that's another way to loop the administrator into what's happening.
So just a quick question is, so they would be making goals through whatever goals were set through the diversity and thinking office? Okay.
Excellent, thank you, diversity committee. Communications committee council was not listed on the agenda, but is there anything to report from communications?
We're gonna meet, I think, probably back to back with the next week, so we'll return to that after.
Okay. Well, that works well because everybody's on finance, that's great. Okay. Now sustainability council.
That was me. I
That's-
was trying to set up the first meeting. David, I didn't understand. You can tell Bart we're gonna have a meeting, not ask. I was waiting for a reply, what dates are good? You told me, you tell her. So I'm aiming for before the next meeting, directly before, whatever date it is next, 2 weeks from today.
Yeah.
Unless it conflicts with another committee that has the same people. But that's what I want to try to do, because you're right, David. Cut down the carbon footprint, sustainability council should do that. So if we're driving somewhere, let's try to do it at the same time. So that's the idea.
I
So
look at that.
within the next 2 weeks.
And so have you thought about how you're going to outreach to community members who might be interested in that?
I'm not sure yet. That's hopefully what we'll talk about in the first meeting. I haven't come up with any yet.
Because at this point, you're running that show. And I don't know if there's any other board members that are available, have some time to serve to kind of help get this going.
Tonight, maybe?
No, at the next meeting, I just think it's a heavy lift. Thank you for taking that on. And just in terms of understanding how you coordinate with central office and all the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty and knowing who everybody is in the schools. A lot of us have spent a lot of time in various schools in this process over the last couple of years. So I'm on finance committee, so I can't be at the same time to help you out. But perhaps I can sit
Let me
on
do some
too.
research before the next one.
Yeah, and I'm certainly would love to help you get that going and figure out some people in the communities that might be asked about, so.
The communications committee maybe will help me with some outreach.
Emily, could you just pass the louder? The
So
fans
the
right behind you.
communications committee doesn't have any, like, we don't know what we're doing yet, but it might be that we could help you if you need something written up or whatnot, since we don't have anything on our agenda at the moment.
Thank you, Emily, great idea. And so Lyle and I spoke, and just in terms of bringing the board and the public up to speed with our current curriculum content about climate change. Lyle, take it away.
All right, I will. So there was some question last time about whether we're teaching about climate change in our schools, and the answer is absolutely we are. We teach it as a significant issue that affects global climate patterns, and we talk about teach about greenhouse gases. We want students to have a deep understanding of the underlying science, and to ensure that students know that it's human activity that really does affect climate change. It's something that's really shared among the science community, this understanding about climate change. So some of the topics are weather and the processes of influencing changes in weather, climate, the role of oceans in affecting climate, Earth history, ice ages, warming periods, food webs, flow of energy, and all of these topics sort of circle around. So we start in kindergarten with weather and climate, and then it will come back around again in 3rd grade and back around again in 8th grade. And each time it comes around, of course, we're studying it in a little more advanced and a deeper way. So we ask students to define some problems, design solutions, make arguments that are based on evidence, on some of the research that we've done. And it's all based on the science standards, the next generation science standards. Specifically at the high school, we have classes that include sustainability, the earth space science. It's required by all 9th graders, includes sustainability. Wildlife ecology and management talks about sustainability. There's an environmental science and policy class. That class actually did what's called Project Atlantic. It was a combined project with the Brattleboro Town, you remember, Brattleboro Town Energy and the BUHS students. They have presented their findings around the state. They consult with Bernie Sanders. Last year, I think the Brattleboro Town School Board had a presentation done by 6th grade academy students on creating a green roof and what that would entail. So I feel like whatever was said that made me think like, wait a minute, people think we don't teach about climate is incorrect. We do a lot of work on climate and sustainability. So that's a little overview of what we do. And Mike Auerbach, who's actually the teacher at the high school that's created the Project Atlantic, would love to come and do a presentation. Probably Ian and Sean's not here, but he did a presentation of that project with students a few years ago in BU6, but he's happy to come and talk about that with us at another time.
You read the mind, that sounds like fun.
It is fun. It's great.
Put that on for the winter.
Yep.
Sounds good. Global warming sounds not so bad in San
Just one
Yeah.
point, I think part of the select board's been getting similar input from the community, particularly youth in the community. And I think that what's different is not so much what we've been doing, from what you just described for the number of years in the project. The Atlantic project was a while ago. It's been going for a long time. We've had things going on kind of commensurate with the sense of urgency and the sense of importance. I think that what's different now is that it's astonishingly more urgent. As the information comes out, I just read a review today of a book, and the first thing about 2 books, and the first statement was, does it make sense to write a book about the climate emergency because it's getting so much worse, so much more quickly. So there's just a much greater sense of urgency and wanting it to be a lot higher priority. Obviously, school districts don't change their curriculum on a dime like that, but the awareness of it and the focus of it, I think we can affect and try and develop it.
Thank you, Lyle. Thank you, David. So I am entertaining public comment from anybody under 18.
That's great. It's me. I'm going to keep this kind of quick, but two things. First of all, I think that you guys are definitely teaching us about climate change. Speaking as a kid who has been through public school, I went to academy for the first 7 years of my curriculum. I do think you guys are teaching us about it, but I do not think it is enough. I didn't really learn anything about it in 3rd grade. Kindergarten, I don't remember learning anything at all. 6th grade, it was my teacher's choice to teach us about. I was part of the Green Roof Project, actually. So I think what you guys are doing is great right now, but I think we need more, and it's like a pressing issue. We have 11 years, and you're educating, like I said in my letter, you're educating the kids right now that are going to stop it, like me. And I personally, I would really love more going into high school too. The second thing is on September 20th, there's this huge, it's a global climate strike. It's a protest declared by the youth activist Greta Thunberg. And the last time we tried to organize a protest here was in March. Actually, that's not true. Well, the first protest that I went to here was in March. And I would strongly urge the school board or district to allow students, if not encourage them, to come to this event, because the last time we were actually opposed by the school's system. We weren't allowed to stand on school property. There was a thing about the printers. And recently some kids tried to leave the school to protest, and the principal of BAMS denied them not being able to leave. I guess he was doing his job, but he justified it by saying that it would be dangerous for them to leave because of counter protests. So I really don't think that's a legit excuse, and I think that there definitely needs to be more flexibility around letting kids protest and be able to go to these events and stuff. And this is, if you don't let us, we're gonna have to. We're not gonna abide by you. We're gonna strike either way. But it's whether you guys stand with us or whether we have to take it into our hands. Thank you.
Any other committees that I've missed, or any other additions to the committee discussion on sustainability? Cruising. Robin.
Hi, Robin Morgan, Brattleboro. I just wanted to briefly request that the board look into the green roof proposal by the 6th graders from Academy last year. That we had said on our board that we were going to explore that and maybe see if it would be financially feasible. One of the things that they mentioned in their proposal actually was that when it's raining on a flat roof, it becomes so noisy that it's difficult to hear in the classroom. So everyone can get a taste of what the 6th graders are going through, plus all of the ecological benefits that they had talked about. So I hope you guys can put that on a committee's agenda to maybe get a quote or an estimate or a walkthrough from relevant agency to see about if that's possible to do that work.
So if there's any former Brattleboro Town School Board members that could forward any information, contacts they had, so that we don't have to start from square one and forward them. It would seem like it would belong to the Sustainability Council, so if you could forward.
Yeah, it does. I think that Kelly and John have been looking at, and Frank have looked into this. I think there's some. Maybe it's I thought that the administrators were exploring that.
Thank you, Robin. Any other? Sorry.
So what would it mean, so I've heard a few different times, and I didn't get your name.
I'm Jacob.
Jacob?
Jacob.
Jacob, sorry. Oh, okay. You actually emailed before, okay, that's. So, well, what would it mean, because we have talked about it a little bit before, and I don't want everything just to fall on the sustainability committee, for climate to be more integrated into the curriculum, and who would actually be doing that? Would it be individual teachers if we were taking a stance, let's say, okay, we want climate to be more integrated, or to feel more like the emergency that it is? It seems like a lot of work, and I know, having been a teacher, like everything ends up falling, like try to adjust your curriculum a little. But like, what would an overarching approach be, and are there enough kids in each grade, if students are really asking for this in all grades, are there enough kids that could be engaged that they could adjust some pieces of the curriculum as kind of like almost like side projects for project-based learning or whatnot, that could then be integrated, so it's not all just falling on the teachers. I don't know, there's so many systematic things that would have to go on, but I guess if we do want to make progress on this, especially in this year, we have to have some kind of way to talk about this more substantially and say like who's actually going to do something.
I would say that the sustainability committee should first meet with Paul Smith, who is the curriculum coordinator who oversees the science portion of the curriculum. Paul Smith.
Hey, can I ask, is there a policy on student protest or staff? I know there's union has a thing where the staff, I know staff has been told we can't, but like what, is there?
There's not a policy. Our job is to make sure students are safe,
Right.
and letting a 7th and 8th grader go off campus would never happen.
No, but I'm asking about the policy just because I know that there's been times where like I get an email that like, oh, the students are protesting transgender rights and they're doing it at such and such time at such and such a place. So like there's a way that it's happening at the school. So that's what I was trying to understand. Oh, okay, it's by each principal. Okay.
Okay, moving on to unfinished business. As we move into the regularly scheduled school year, I've heard some feedback from board members, maybe this is not the optimal time, so I wanted to kind of check in with board members and find out if Wednesday at 6 o'clock works for the school year, because I know people's lives change. So is there anybody that has an issue with a Wednesday 6 o'clock board meeting time? Excellent.
Is it possible to start earlier, or do we want to keep that 5 to 6 time for committees?
It's very hard for me to start earlier.
Okay, yeah, if people have the work schedule, it's not, it can't be done. So, yeah, I just didn't know that. Okay. End of question.
If we were going to be in
Next topic.
Dummerston for every meeting, if the location is in Dummerston, yes, then yes, but driving here, it's
So
hard to
6
get
o'clock
here.
is great.
Yeah, 6 o'clock works. And so the statutes require us to have a time and place of our regular meetings. And maybe we can't meet that in our effort to be in every building, but one option I thought of was that we would have the first meeting of every month be at the high school, and then go to the more far-flung locations. Do you have a question?
The time and place of our regular meeting should be clearly designated. It just means that I don't think it means we have to have it at the same place every time, because we've never done that. Well, in Brattleboro we have, because we've got 3 schools, so we always, and at least we've always moved around. I think we have to say the time and the place where we're meeting, but it doesn't have to be always the same.
Because I kind of read it as by a resolution, not by an agenda. So when I read that whole sentence, it seems to me, but I'm going to take your read on it, David. I like your read of the statute.
Well, it's past practice, so
Yeah.
that's like statute. Until you go to court.
Okay, there we go. So do we want to have the first meeting maybe at the high school and then do the other schools, or do we want to keep moving it around as we have? I just wanted to take people's pulse before we set our next agendas.
My high school is the most centralized location, and so at least half the meetings would be, I don't know, the easiest for all of us to get to, because I know for people from Guilford, Putney is a drive, and driving here today is a drive. And I think we're wasting a lot of gas when we pull a lot of people to the farther flung locations. And Putney is equally a far flung location than Guilford as far as I'm concerned.
So should we
Maybe at least half of them, or at least trying to
school and
be,
then
yeah.
make sure we're getting into all the buildings during the year? Excellent. So I will go forth and schedule the first and the third Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And the first meeting will be at the high school, and then we will mix it around as we have been doing. And I'm hoping that we can, as part of these meetings, have a 30-minute walkthrough, as we've discussed many times. Once school is in session, there's actually stuff in the schools and principals and teachers around that we'll have like a 30-minute walkthrough with the prior to the board meeting or at the start of the board meeting, just so we can sort of hear from admin. Excellent. So I will work with Lyle to come up with that schedule so I can find out when principals are available on those Wednesdays for those opportunities.
So when we're talking Brattleboro, are we gonna also include the Brattleboro Elementary School in the mix?
We could do that.
Otherwise, we don't ever get to see Academy Green.
Well, they could be part of the small rotation.
Yes, that's what I wanted.
I mean, that's what kind of I meant
Okay.
first.
That's good.
So the board retreat, which is, I sent around an email this morning, we have finally, nothing like planning things for the first couple days of school. We are going to meet at EES September 29th from 3:30 to about 6:30, right? And we're planning on a light supper being served in there. I have read on my VSBA webinar that a light meal is a good idea for the board retreat to create cohesiveness and build teams. So when Lyle said, oh, I think we should have a retreat, I'm like, well, why? And she said, maybe so we could come up with a mission statement and a vision statement and come up with some goals. And I was like, oh yeah, we're so far in the weeds when we started out this process of, we have to have a budget, we have to have policies, that I think it would be great that we can come up for air for a little bit and do some long-range planning and work together as a board, not approving warrants and policies, but really think in a more visionary kind of way, which is kind of fun to do after 3 or 4 months of really just getting the work done. So I just want to make sure that that vision is shared by the rest of my fellow board members and the superintendent, who actually suggested, so she's changed her mind, but that we work on mission and vision and come up with some tangible goals for this board for the next 6 months of its tenure as we launch the ship of the WSESD in a big way. And I'm happy to entertain some other agenda items for that, if anybody has any suggestions.
Is there gonna be any pre-work in the sense of, I don't know the goals that the whole school district has still, that are related to their strategic plan or individual schools. And so if I was gonna plan some goals, I would like it in some way to be linked to what's actually going on in the schools. Because then we can actually have some ways to track these things. So if that's possible to get at least, 5 days or, by the end of this week, then we'll have time to review them and everybody can come in a way that seems like forward thinking.
Thank you, Emma, that's a great idea. Do we have that?
We have the continuous improvement plans.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the board retreat?
It's Thursday, 3:30,
The 29th.
Yes.
because I had to do 2 days, I took it out of one, I took it out of Wednesday, and I want to make sure.
Yeah, there were obligations at central office, so it took us a little bit to work that out. EES is available.
Yes, but not till 3:30.
Right, yeah, okay. Excellent. So moving on, so I will put out an agenda for that in the next couple days. Always an agenda. We have the adoption of the new policies, the new substitute teacher policy and D6, as well as LSP1, the BUH dress code that was adopted by the previous BUHS board. I would entertain a motion to approve policies D6 and LSP1, local school policy for BUHS dress code.
So moved.
Thank you, Anne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Emily. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve, before I do that, is there any public comment on either policy? Hearing no comments, all those in favor of adoption of D6 and LSP1, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays and abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion carries. We have 2 new policies, just in the nick of time. I also want to go back because I did not do this before. There had been a public comment, and I meant to do this under communications, that the board should abandon, there had been some discussion in public comment, the board should abandon Robert's Rules of Order. And I said I believe that Robert's Rules we are required to use Robert's Rules. And then the public said, no, we aren't. And I looked up the statute the other day, and it's 16 VSA 554. This is, I'm not an attorney, I'm not giving legal advice, but the plain language is this. A school board meeting shall be conducted in accordance with Vermont open meeting law. Robert's Rules of Order shall govern the conduct of school board meetings, period. So, and there's no other, a school board shall afford a reasonable opportunity to any person in the school district to appear. So it's, to me, that's very clear that we, while we're hoping to get a facilitator and when we need one for certain parts of the agenda, that we cannot abandon by statute Robert's Rules of Order. So I just wanted to clarify that for the board.
Just to be on the record, I wouldn't support banning it. It's designed, I mean, people have used it to obstruct things, but none of us are sophisticated enough to use it that way anyway, and it really makes it possible to get your work done and to stay, to have a structure to organize the conversation. It doesn't restrict anything. And because we've adopted the one for small boards, it also doesn't restrict you, and we can talk about things before we have motions, and we can pass things just because everybody agrees. And it's really about as simple as you can want, but it's a really useful structure.
Thank you, David. It's also helpful that people know, people who are used to Robert's Rules, like there's a set of rules that people can look up online, as opposed to making up our own rules. We've got a lot of things to make up right now. So.
This is not about Robert's Rules.
Okay, what is it about?
It's about restorative justice. I have 15 minutes more of babysitter time, and I was hoping, I wasn't sure where that is on the agenda.
So, it's under other business, and we're adding the public comment as one of the last items.
Okay.
If it's okay with the board, how much time do you need?
Oh.
Well, yeah,
Well, I just
I
want
would like to bring the board up to date on what's happening in terms of
It's like 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
to, can you do it under, well, we're doing restorative practices right after this update from Lyle on Putney Aftercare, which is probably 2 minutes. Would that make sense to do it there?
Yeah, that's next.
And then we're staying on agenda, and I don't have to get everybody to agree automatically.
Keep us from wasting a lot of time on childcare.
Okay, moving right on.
Somebody got these, Sarah.
So we received it's not been an ideal situation that Putney Central's aftercare program, as it has existed in the past, does not appear to be happening at the start of the school year. So Herb and Lyle have been working to try to mitigate that circumstance, and it's not the way you want to start the school year, and we all understand what an important thing it is to know that your children have quality care and where they're going after school. So Lyle's been sort of monitoring this, and she agreed to give us a few-minute update on kind of where they stand.
And Ruby's been a part of this, and Herb is here, and he can fill in anything, So Herb was, as you know from our last meeting, Herb was contacted not too long ago by WSESD that they would no longer be offering a program of aftercare at Putney. Herb has reached out to people at school to see if anyone's interested from school employees to stay and do aftercare. I think he's put it on Facebook. Dora Levinson, who is the area of Building Bright Futures and Child Care Counts person, has been in touch with her as well to see if there's anything that they can do to help find people. So far, I'm not certain that we found anyone permanent, but why don't you talk?
Yeah, sure. No, we haven't found anybody yet. The last conversation, which was today I had with Dora, was that they have quite a list, of emails. We talked a little bit about the possibility of maybe seeing if we could get a couple of people, we need two, to run the program after school at PCS, even until, commit till Thanksgiving, right? And between now and then, we'll try to work some things out. The other thing that's, I think is a remote possibility, because I think they're already full, is that if we had some people who are really in a jam, I think most of the people are, given the news, have been scrambling, trying to figure out, okay, what can we do instead? We might be able to join Dummerston. That does complicate things mightily in terms of transportation. So that's really where it's at. I mean, we're doing the outreach, we've got the information out there, and we're looking for people, with unemployment scraping rock bottom. Pretty much anybody who wants a job has one, and so these after-school gigs for 3 or 4 hours a day are not as appealing as they've been in the not-too-distant past. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Art. So moving on to restorative practices training opportunities. So shall I turn it over so that,
How about if I do a real quick update?
okay,
And that is going to include the work that I did with Michaela and Mel and some other people last year, and then turn it up to Mike. So last year, Putney worked all year with Greater Falls and Brattleboro Restorative Justice Centers, so they've had some study groups around restorative practices. Mel is here, so she can probably fill in some specifics on that. Vernon and Green Street both have restorative practice groups comprised of students led by an adult at the school. Academy spent all of last year really researching restorative practices in schools around the state, and they're working, so they worked last year so that this year they can reframe sort of their discipline system so that they are more reflective of restorative practices. John Sessions, overseeing that, has been working with Mike Sostak. Mike also talked about Amelia Glickman. Are you going to talk about her today? So I won't talk about Amelia. Mike can talk about BUHS and BAMS. And the other thing that I want to make sure everyone knows is that we applied for a grant. We have the grant here. It took quite a few people a long time, and I want to thank Mike and Mel and Michaela, Marissa Lazarus from Putney, Julianne Egan, John Sessions, Tess Peterson, Diana Wally spent a lot of time putting together this grant. Very, very comprehensive. And unfortunately, we didn't feel as though we got good feedback, or I'll leave it at that, from the state people that were looking at that grant. But I'll turn it over to Mike, and that's as polite as I can be.
And with that grant, there was actually 2 pockets of money the state had. One for this grant that would go to some schools or multiple schools. That's what we applied for, and we did not get. I don't know who got it, and I don't know why we didn't get it. And I did ask, and still didn't get a response. And the second pocket of money was for a contract. They termed as a contract to support the schools. The organization that got the contract was Restorative Approaches Collaborative, and the collaborative is composed of about 35 people throughout the state. I'm actually one of the 35. Mel's another one of the 35, although I haven't been an active participant in this collaborative. Anyway, they got this pocket of money. And so a week or so ago, we get this letter that says, hey, okay, if you want help from the collaborative, you have to apply. And it's due August the 28th. And that's a little bothersome to me because most people like myself aren't even here to respond to that until next week. And if you look at what they're asking for, it's like it was written by a college professor. I mean, it's asking stuff that goes beyond what I think is reasonable. But the question would be, okay, there's this restorative, this piece of support out there from the collaborative, but I don't really know what that means, what that support actually would mean yet. So the question would be, or two questions. One is, do we apply for this or not? And secondly, do we apply for it as a district, or do we let each school apply for it separately? For the grant, we decided to do it as a district. And I don't know. I don't know what the best way to handle this is. Again, like I said, I'm a little bothered by just how the whole thing's being handled. It makes me a little queasy about applying, but I'll do it if people think we should do it. And, now you might have, well, another important thing to say is when we applied for the grant, one of the key things we were looking for two key things. One is someone to kind of coordinate things for the district as a whole. We don't have anybody like that right now. I sort of filled in that role temporarily for grant purpose, but we don't really have anybody like that. And secondly, was to have support resource primarily from Mel and her staff. So that's what we were looking for money to do, which we didn't get. So right now there's a real problem, and I know this because I work with Mel, that there's a real problem. We have one of the strongest resources in the state in terms of Mel and our people, in terms of restorative work, and yet getting access to that now is going to be really tough because, well, I'll let you talk about what availability, what would
Sure. I can just re-emphasize too how we've spent the past year working really closely with Putney Central, which has been amazing, and that's included monthly PLCs, that's included in-classroom circle work support, that's included being available to respond to conflicts that come up and help coach teachers and students and kids through those conflicts, and we'd like to keep working together. And I don't have, when I think about the entire district and partnering with the Justice Center to do that, what we would need is an entire staff person, which we tried to go for with this initial grant. So while applying for this contract funding might give access to the district or specific schools to work with a restorative professional throughout the state, it wouldn't necessarily be us, both because that's not how it works. There's a bunch of criteria that go into deciding who gets to work with each school. And also because I'm not sure that we have the capacity to put together piecemeal PDs here and there. As it stands, I have a very, very part-time contract person that's probably able to work with 2 schools right now with the funding that we have. So I don't have a yes or no as to my recommendation for this, but what I will say is that we have had such a great experience working with Lyle and Putney Central and counselors throughout the district in this last year, and I'm certainly committed to working together with individual schools and the district to try to find funding that can support this type of partnership, whether that's this or something else.
But again, you're not in a position to do much without some kind of funding. I mean,
Certainly not, yeah.
And that's kind of what we're up against right now. So, again, going back to the question, August 28th, do we look for resources from this collaborative? And again, it's not clear as to what that even means. And if we do look for those resources, do we let each school go after it, or do we apply as a district?
My understanding from just looking at the materials we do have is that there is somewhat of a prescribed method for how schools can engage with it. There are some dates already set up throughout the year for regional PLCs. There's data analysis that goes into it as well. So there are a few things that are laid out, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. I think something that's been really valuable as we put together this grant proposal is schools got to say, here's what we want to do. And how do we match that with what the state is offering is something we have to look into as well.
Well, there's a really Lippman piece that you promised to talk about.
Oh, yes, and one other resource. Right now, the resource I have is just myself at the high school, and I've been working with, doing work for the high school and for bands. We had about 130 restorative requests to handle last year, just to give you an idea of the volume of cases. But this year, I'm going to have a person doing independent study who's going to be working with me every other block, fourth block for the first semester, and that's Amelia Cookman. So I'll have at least some resource, some additional resource that I've never had before, and she's really good. She's a very talented person, and she's been a real key person on my restorative campus. So she's also on the board of justice. So, but again, that's kind of where we're at.
I appreciate all the important work you're doing with so few resources. Amelia Glickman, though, is a supercharged human being. I've known her since kindergarten. She's been like that since kindergarten. So I'm glad the world has provided in some ways. I think perhaps it's helpful for us to hear all this, because there's nothing more frustrating than putting a grant together, and then the only thing more frustrating than not getting the money is not getting feedback as to what you could have done and have it be a learning process. So I think that in my view as a board member, I think it's not ours to give you that guidance. I think it's really important that we're hearing about it, but you all need to figure out in this limited time what the best use of the resources are through Lyle. And I just wanted to make sure that, I think David's concern was that, wait, here's an opportunity, and getting this background is super helpful to all of us.
If you decide to go ahead, you want me or us to apply for this as a district, I would pretty much fill in this questionnaire by just referring to our grant and say, we laid it out, what we're doing, our plan, our approach. I don't think I would attempt to redo everything in the format that they're looking for.
I think the timing is unreasonable as well. If we'd had more time, maybe, but the fact that, we have to reapply for something that we've already worked on is very frustrating.
That might be a good strategy, though, just to resubmit that and say, see the report, because everybody else is under the same time constraint, so there may be fewer people vying for it, who knows?
I'm willing to do that if you would like me to.
Yeah, that won't, other than changing the date, we won't require.
Well, I will use their format, but simply, many places, I'm just going to say, see grant proposal.
Yeah, I agree with Christina. This is really helpful to get more information. I didn't even know that you worked with the schools, and I didn't know that Putney was doing what they're doing. And I found out this year that you're in the high school, and I know that Green Street's been doing something, and Academy started doing something, and it's just like, we need to be doing this everywhere really well and really comprehensively. But I also have I don't know what the right word is, but I wasn't surprised by an unrealistic deadline or a PhD dissertation application form. And because I'm familiar with the agency and their resources and how they do things. And it sounds like what you're doing is really the right thing for us to be doing right now. And that if we want to expand, what we need to to do is exactly what you said. When budget time comes, we ask you to bring a proposal, obviously working with the administration, bring a proposal for support resources for the Community Justice Center and support and for district coordination. I have a feeling that this is something that the community would really support, and I also have a feeling that we and certainly the administration wouldn't mind not having a brand new huge initiative to have to start this fall as well. So maybe maybe we're on the right track, and we just need to support what we're doing. The other thought that came to mind, I looked through the some of the application, because I remember how many pages, it was too many to read. But it seems like the decision's already made to try and, by applying for the agency money, the decision's already made to try and do it across all the schools. And so I think, everybody's nodding their head. I think that's good, that's going to be our goal as well. And but one thing that we can definitely do this year, once the Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee meets, is set up a system for getting the precise numbers for the number of days of lost instruction in an exclusionary discipline, and any other time, just to really get details about what are these issues really, what's the impact really be in terms of numbers, quantitative, because we know qualitatively what it does, but to just have those numbers so we can talk about this.
Part of our proposal, our grant proposal, was to actually put in place a better data capture system. I mean, that takes time.
So this committee made, this Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee just decided that we'd like you to do that and ask them to put some resources into that immediately. So we'll see.
All right, so thanks.
Thank you, Mel and Gail, and for coming tonight.
So anything else on this before we move on? We have a couple of policies as I added to the agenda. The community use of school facilities. Policy committee took a look at the model policy from the VSBA for the central office. Added our changes. It's our community use of school facilities H3. The big change that we made was what we talked about as a board last time, that all users shall be required to make clear in all announcements and publicity that their events and activities are not sponsored or endorsed by the school district. This should be immediately adjacent to the school site location in a font not less than 75% of the school site location font. So if you're saying you're having an event at the Guilford School, you will have to say that use of school facilities does not imply endorsement by the school board, and that font will have to be 70. If you write Guilford School like this, your font has to be 75% of that in the disclaimer so that it isn't somewhere around the back. Also, Robin Morgan had forwarded the Anti-Defamation League's sort of white paper sheet that explained in great detail their recommendations for how to assure that schools are not running afoul of the law. And one of the concerns that's in the case law was that teachers should not participate in those meetings in the school where they work. So if a teacher wants to, and they teach here in Guilford, they shouldn't have it in Guilford because it could be confusing to students, and it would move into that realm that church and schools are not separate. So that was one of their other recommendations that we added here. So we're certainly not precluding teachers from participating in club meetings, but just they can't, they're religious in nature, they just can't do it in the school where they work because that might be confusing to small children. So I know you got this kind of last minute because it's very busy this time of year. We could warn this, we could give it a 10-day warning and get it ready to go, or we could wait till the following meeting if people want to take it and digest it a little bit more. But I think the policy committee is pretty comfortable with this as it stands at this point. So, seeing that I'm not hearing any protest about this from the board, my plan is that we will warn it for adoption because we can always not pass it and make changes. So I'll put it on for a 10-day warning. And if you have any concerns, when you have a good amount of time to go through the policy, send them to the chair of the policy committee, that's me. And when the policy committee meets, we can see if we can address it and then decide if we're going to pass that policy or not.
Sure. So one of the things that the policy committee did spend just a few minutes on was the fee structure. I've taken that to all of the different groups, the outlying town principals, the in-town principals, and the EU6 principals. The EU6 principals reported that they have not reviewed and updated their fee structure in many years, so they want some time to do that. The Brattleboro town principals do not have a consistent fee structure. They want to meet to create a consistent fee structure. And then Guilford, Dummerston, and Putney, I've gotten some feedback from them, so we also would want some time to work on some consistency around fee structure. So we can pass this policy, but fee structures are going to come a bit later.
I think that's fine. That's not really the policy, so I think that's fine. So the other policy that we were looking at is the school animal policy, and with many of our policies, they were not in concert because we were 5 separate districts, so trying to come up with a consistent policy. And this policy comes mostly from the VSBA model policy, I believe.
And we had a couple of schools that had policies, but not all, so we took what we had and
added and married up. So obviously, any animals that are service dogs, guide dogs, hearing dogs, those are covered under ADA, and those are of course allowed on school grounds. We're moving towards looking at dogs that are on campuses are certified therapy dogs, and that applies to the whole campus. It's as dogs have. I own a dog. He's wonderful, so I have to say I love dogs. But I know on the Deverson fields, a lot of families have been bringing their dogs to the fields, and some of those dogs are well behaved, and some of them are not so well behaved. And there's been incidents of dogs lunging and nipping at kids when people are bringing their dogs to sporting activities, and so. I think it's something that we're taking, if we're allowing dogs on campus, we're opening the schools up to liability too, for dogs that are not certified and trained. So this is what the Policy and Amendment Committee came up with, and happy to have a discussion about it, thoughts. A lot of it's left up to the principal. If you're bringing animals into school for programs or whatever, a lot of that's going to be left up to the school principal with this policy. And I apologize you got this so late, so perhaps we can, yeah. I have a hard copy. So perhaps similarly, I will put that on the warning, and then we can, if you have concerns, we can address it at the policy and amendment committee meeting, and we can choose not to pass it or pass it. Was that public comment or bugs?
That is, well, what's the second choice?
Or bugs in this? Or did somebody bring insects into the school?
Probably. So is it okay to comment on our history with
Yes.
dogs at PCS? Okay, so I'm Herb Pelletier, principal of PCS. I am entering year 10, as the principal there. Sorry, yeah, Putney Central, yeah. One of the things that we've really worked hard at Putney Central, I know this is common across the district, so I'm not trying to make us sound like we're somehow special and different, although I think we are. But is the idea that we're dealing with a student population now that's increasingly challenging in terms of trauma, right? And one of the best ways to provide what Dave Melnick, who's an authority on trauma, refers to as stress buffers for children, is to have a distraction piece. In the past, what we've done is we think of these things as sort of brain breaks. You go for a certain amount of time with instruction, give a kid a break. it hasn't proven to be effective with kids from trauma. What has been proven to be very effective, and the research backs this up 110%, is having animals in the building, specifically dogs, and believe it or not, sometimes horses. You won't be getting a horse. But Stacy's here as well, because we are the two people who have dogs. Ellen actually in the past has had her little Pearl in from time to time. And what we found, based on our past practice and experience, is that they're extremely valuable to have in the building. My dog has been with me virtually every day. His name's Blue, he's a black lab, some of you may have met him. Virtually every day for 6 years. And he's going in year 7 right now. It's proven invaluable. When kids come up to my office, they're sitting outside, they're whimpering about something, they're upset about something, or they're enraged about something. He knows, because he's been trained, I trained him, he goes over to that child and he sits next to them, right? He doesn't do anything, he doesn't necessarily get there. And all of a sudden, what I observe, I don't need to say anything to him or to the child. They put the hand on him, something happens, and it breaks the thought pattern. And I think that, and we've been doing this, there's been pets, dogs specifically in Putney Central, that long predate my arrival 9 years ago. And we've certainly got the endorsement of all the sort of mental health people in the building. Marissa Lazarus happens to be in New Mexico, lucky her. She would be here, I'm sure, to speak to this, as would Barry Shaw, who's one of our counselors, and Susan Wagner on the efficacy. So there's lots of really strong reasons why you want to have animals, dogs specifically, in the building. And just a quick comment, I'll let Stacy speak as well, but just a quick comment on the certified therapy dog notion. I don't anticipate bringing my dog into the ICU anytime soon. You know? So that bar, in terms of that piece of the certification, is not one that we're striving for. What we're trying to do is to add to a very positive school climate one other aspect, not just for the kids who are struggling, but for everybody. And in my experience, and my perspective on it is it's been hugely successful. And we had just one last thing. I'm thinking about one little guy in particular who came in as a kindergartner, absolutely terrified of dogs. So we're always near the entrance in the morning, most days, standing there talking, greeting families and kids as they come in. And this guy, he jumped out of his skin when he came in the door. I couldn't believe it. And so over several months' time, sort of made it work. We just made it work for him. And now when he sees the dog in the hallway, he gives him the bear hug. And it's really changed his attitude towards school. So I know many of you, this is Vermont, have dogs and think very highly of them. And I'm no exception to that. But I do think that this serves a very specific purpose in our school. They're not pets necessarily. I think of them more almost like, search and rescue dogs, or canine dogs, right? When they're on the job during the day, they're on the job. When they go home with the owner or the handler, the trainer at night, that happens to be us. They're the family pet. And then we go back the next day and we do it all over. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think that the overwhelming majority of people feel that this has been a very, very positive thing at PCS. You want to add?
Sure. And Christine, I totally get what you're saying about animals on a field and, the misbehaving dogs and dogs fighting and all that kind of thing. It's really not what you're looking for, obviously, in a school setting. So I understand that. I think coming from it from an educational standpoint, I've been a director of a camp that allowed dogs. I've been a Kindle farm that allowed dogs. I know the Putney school allows the Greenwood school. I've had a lot of experiences with schools that allow dogs and seen it work very well. Like anything else, there's liability and concerns because just like people, not everyone is well behaved and dogs aren't always well behaved. It's more about the people than the dogs. I'm a special educator by my background, and so for me, just to give a little different background, is that I came to it coming into that school, developing relationships with kids that I worked with that were having a hard time. They heard about my dog. I would talk about my dog at school, and they would say, "Can we meet your dog?" And And then they wanted to, we would like earn a walk with my dog at lunchtime, things like that. They would read books and they would earn walks. And so there was this interesting connection that I developed with the kids, that they developed with my dog, that at one point, I only brought her in once a week and we did fluency work with kids because I had done research that dogs help promote fluency with kids because they don't feel the stress of reading to a dog that they do to a person. And so I would bring my dog in and we would have what we called Furry Fluency Fridays, and kids would read and practice reading to my dog in my room. So it wasn't necessarily about just bringing my dog to school to have a dog there. And the connections for me that I've been able to make with families around animals, and sometimes challenging families, has been pretty impressive. Just this bridge of having an animal, and they say, "Oh, we've heard about Molly at home, and tell me more." And just a really different, I guess, way of looking at school. And like anything, I feel like, yes, we need rules and we need parameters around things, but my concern, not just about this is going to be me on my soapbox for a second, is that I know we're merging, and we are merged, but like not to lose like the individual schools. And like if there's things going on in the school, like how are we, this is a bigger question, how are we dealing with it at the school level versus the board level? How are we bringing concerns as parents or teachers? Like what are our protocols for dealing with things? Because this is the first I heard that it was a concern was before I came to this meeting, right? So being there a long time, I'd never had a parent approach me, I'd never had an email, I'd never had any sort of like idea that this was something of concern to people, which I would have been happy to have a dialogue with, because I'm not saying I have all the answers, but, and of course I want kids, my primary goal is to advocate for kids and to make them comfortable. So if kids are uncomfortable, like that's not what I'm looking for. So I guess my bigger question is like, how does this work in general? I mean, as a parent and as a teacher, I'm just sort of trying to figure that out. Like, what are our steps when we have concerns? And just from an equity lens, this meeting is a half hour away from us. And, obviously not all the voices are at the table. So how do we do that? How do we make sure all the voices are heard and not just the people who have the means to get to meetings?
I have a concern when it talks about farm animals, and I know that here in Guilford, the pre-K or kindergarten, I'm not sure whether it extends to first grade. I know they hatch chickens. And so I believe one of the teachers was just asking about looking for a rabbit for her class and that sort of thing. So I think those are things that they do each year, and so for academic purposes. And so I'm concerned that this doesn't start affecting the academic.
I think that's covered in a different, I had the same question, and I think they talk about birds and stuff, and the birds you can have. I was like, okay, that kind of, the chicken thing is kind of covered. Because it does say chicks and ducks that you have to encourage hand washing immediately following contact, but you should not have parrots, parakeets, macaws, pigeons, and doves, because those kinds of birds carry psittacosis. I'm going for it. So sort of to put some parameters on that. So from that perspective, I think the chicken hatching would, God help me if I'm in a room with a rabbit trying to get anything done, or a guinea pig. So because my eyes will close up and seize up within 30 seconds. So that's, just Emily.
So with your concerns, I'm wondering, is it a concern with the certified therapy dog? Is that the concern? Because it sounds like the dogs aren't certified therapy dogs, which I don't even know how rigorous that training really is, but.
Expensive too.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah,
but
okay.
so just a quick word on the therapy piece. That's sort of become it is a big moneymaker for AKC and other large organizations like that, because you have to pay fees to get your dog to walk down the hallway and ignore another dog, for example, that sort of stuff. I think it's just, and I'm not necessarily averse to that, given some time to respond to that request. But I think what's more important is to consider these animals emotional support animals. That's really what their role is. And like I said earlier, I wouldn't bring my dog to the ICU unit. I wouldn't bring him to the oldest patient, frail person in a nursing home and say, hey, here's the visitor, because he's not that dog. He's a kid dog, he's a people dog, but he's not the dog that's gonna go and just stand there and be a presence for someone, for an old person. I should add too, and I forgot to mention this earlier, both the dogs really, but they're so ingrained in the culture of the school right now that my dog has been written into a couple of behavior plans for kids, right? And Pearl too. Yeah, so it goes to show that people sort of get it around the value added by having these animals in the house. We did have a rabbit, by the way, Christine. Jen O'Donnell had one for, 4 years, I think?
And before
Yeah,
that,
he
there was
lived
a
in the
hamster.
classroom.
Oh, you weren't here for the hamster.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but.
So I guess the main thing is because I think when you're talking about, like, there's service dogs and therapy dogs, right? Service dogs cost a super amount of money and usually come pre-trained. And then therapy dogs, there's all different traits. But I guess it's a new set of language, and what we want to do around that is what the question is, right? It's like, do we want to have some standards? Do we feel like at this moment it could all be left up to the principals, and individual principals could decide if they thought that certification was necessary, or the therapy dog certification? Is that what the question is, kind of?
I think the question is, are we going to put some criteria around the dog? And I think the difference between a service dog and a therapy dog is a big walk. It's a big walk
That's
around.
pretty profound.
Yeah.
That's not what
We're not looking to.
No.
Service dogs are for people.
They're for people who have specific
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah, but a therapy dog is a lot lower bar to cross. It sounds like blue would be ideal for a therapy dog, given how you
Sure,
illustrate
yeah.
things. I've seen people get therapy dog certification for dogs that can't do that. So
Yeah.
so
I think.
it's a pass-fail class.
Yeah, I think one suggestion, and then I'll shut up because I like to talk too much sometimes. It might be worth thinking about some language, policy-wise, that says something like, for dogs, for example, or for whatever, who are to be a regular presence in the school environment, ... We would hope, or we would prefer principal's discretion, up to you how you word that. But that's very different than the stuff that you're describing about, and I've seen that, sort of the rambunctious dog that shows up from the neighborhood and, runs around the playground during lunchtime. We've had a few of those too.
And frankly, as a professional person, if my dog was that dog,
Yeah, we
I'm
wouldn't
an idiot if I bring it to school,
Right.
right? Like, that's not okay. So from so many levels, that I can't teach kids, it's not safe, there's so many things. So it does imply a certain level of trust in that the person is aware of what kind of dog they have, and if it matches with kids, and if it doesn't, that they shouldn't be at a school. So I think there's levels of certain, it's hard when it's black and white for me to understand.
Well, I think the sentence is also.
I'm sorry, can you can I just recognize that you stated?
Oh, yes, I'm Ellen Tuma, because I'm the owner of Pearl. And I
Teacher at Peace.
I teach at Putney Central as well as Pearl. But certified therapy dogs as approved by the principal are allowed. That's a very vague statement. Does the principal do the certification? I mean, certified therapy as approved. So does he approve the certification?
He would approve the presence of a dog, of a certified therapy dog. He or she would, he said he, because Mark is here.
Oh, I
But
see.
in this case, if you said, I want to bring Pearl, my certified therapy dog, in, what do you think? Her being the ultimate authority within that building could say, no, we've got 17 therapy dogs in here, we're good. So
Right, but you could interpret that sentence to say that the principal approves whether it is a certified therapy dog or not.
so we can tighten up
Yeah,
that
but
language. So
Is that,
Yeah.
do you want that in?
that's-
Do you?
So I saw Robin's hand up first.
Robin Morgan, Brattleboro. I just wanted to offer another perspective that not all children are soothed by the presence of dogs. My child was bit in the face by a dog last year and had to get stitches. And generally, when there's the presence of a dog that's not like his grandparents' dog or one that he knew predating that incident, he goes into like a fight or flight mode. So I just want people to keep in mind when we're developing these policies that it is not at all universal that children are soothed by dogs or that their behavioral affect at school is improved by the presence of dogs. In fact, I actually approached the principal at Academy School about a dog in an adjacent property who I believe they had an electric fence, but it had sort of the appearance of the dog running around in its yard and it was getting very close to us. And I had to ask like if they could please have the dog inside during arrival times because it was just setting my child off on a really negative emotional state coming into school each day and having to see that dog running alongside him. So I personally would support the language in the policy as it exists, but if that's something that people want to change at the discretion of administrators, I would just hope that all the administrators would keep in mind that not all children feel good when there's dogs around.
I think that's a given. That's a given.
Yes,
It costs so much money.
Could you just state your name?
Liz Adams. It costs so much money to get that certification that you basically would be saying no dogs at school. It's a long process and it's expensive.
So I'm not an expert on this, but I'm curious as to what's involved. I know service dogs is a very long process, but my understanding is that therapy dog is not particularly onerous, but maybe we need to.
And it's pretty expensive. So I want you to think about that. And, you know, Robin's point is well taken. And I have confidence in our teachers and our administrator that if we had a child coming to Putney Central who would flip out or it had like that kind of experience, they would be very careful because they want school to be positive for everybody, not just this kid or this kid, it's everybody.
Ruby McAfee, Putney Central. So I serve on the PTO and brought before you many weeks ago, I don't remember when, we did have someone who anonymously submitted a statement around the policy or the lack of a perceived policy around pets in Putney Central. And so I agree with her in that the vast majority of kids and families are totally okay with the dogs that are on campus. But I do think that, first of all, I think you will never make everyone happy. The safety of kids is important. Both the physical and emotional safety of kids is important. I think that if Putney were, if the school, all the district, but particularly if Putney had a very clear statement, similar to what Herb just stated, around this is our philosophy, this is why we do it, these are the particular dogs that come. So that, I think that there was a conversation I had with this parent years ago around it, was questioning it, was I think around the time probably that, I don't know Molly that well, but when Molly came, there was this other dog. And it was like, what is that? Why are there all these dogs? Is like anyone bringing a dog? Every teacher that has a dog has the opportunity to bring a dog? That was a question. And I don't necessarily, it sounds like that's not what's going on, but if you had within the policy some amount of leeway whereby if a principal pitched or said we'd like to have a program or we have a philosophy that's driven by XYZ, then they could present it to the board on a periodic basis for approval or something like that. Because I do think that if I think the things that Herb stated are compelling around the reasons that it's done in Putney Central School. I don't think as a parent I've ever heard them articulated, and that might kind of solve a lot of the problems of people who feel unwelcome by having dogs around. And it also would invite people whose kids are not doing well, but they're not being vocal about it, to do something. Because the parent that presented their statement part of that was because I think they'd had a number of years where they were asking for what's the policy, and we're being told, well, there isn't one for Putney Central. And so if you have a policy and if there's some way to get word to your principal or to your school board about how you feel about how it's affecting your family, then I think that, you know, that covers most of anyone who's not comfortable with the situation at each school.
So I'm gonna kick it back to committee at this point because everybody's gotten to speak to it and many multiple times, so I'm gonna send it back to the committee and we'll chat about it. And feel free to send if you have additional thoughts you wanna add in writing, it gets copied to the entire board, and that's often a better use of making your point because we tend to read our emails when we're awake and not at 9 o'clock at night. So happy to do that. So if that is acceptable to the board, I knew this was going to be the controversial one tonight, but and let me just say that my dog wakes up my kids every morning, and that's doing God's work as far as I'm concerned, because anybody that wakes up 2 teenagers is so I share your love of dogs. So I'm thinking we probably won't warn that unless we have some epiphany or something kind of thing. So maybe we'll go back and just see and think about language and see what we can do to kind of accommodate as many people's concerns as we can in a policy. Yeah, there's no goal there, no unreasonable goal there. I also wanted to, moving along, to just give folks a VSBA update. Surprise, you're all members of another board in terms of the Vermont School Board Association. We are at this point part of the VSBA. The regional meeting is September 17th at BUHS. There's a lot of changes because there are fewer districts and the whole governance structure has changed. Lo and behold, so did the whole income structure for the VSBA because there were fewer school districts to send them money. So they've come up with a hybrid system where 50% is based on the district fee structure, and then 50% is based on how many students you have. Because a district has a certain number of challenges that they're going to need VSBA services for, and then you probably have slightly more needs if you have more students and you surely have more income. So they're proposing we change from 11 regions to 7 regions. We still keep our region. There'll be a vote for a new VSBA rep, but I don't think anybody is. Dan MacArthur's term is up. I think he's running again. I don't know if anybody else is interested in running. He's been an excellent representative. He can't kick me out because I've got another year on my term. Also, Nicole Mace is stepping down, so there is a search committee looking. She's the current director of the VSBA, and a search committee has been formed with 2 people from the executive committee, 2 people from the board at large, and then 1 staff member to search for a new director. Nicole will leave in November to go into private practice education law. And the conference, the VSBA conference is November 7th and 8th at Lake Maury, and they always have good presenters and agendas. They have not released that yet. They've been, I think, a little busy working on a new director. So anyway, that is what is going on from the VSBA, but there's a bunch of resolutions to vote on that affect the positions that the VSBA takes with the legislature and what they lobby for. And so if you want to come to the regional meeting and hear about that and decide if you agree with the stance they're taking and give feedback and show up at the annual meeting of the VSBA to share your joy at the positions they take or express your dismay. You're welcome to do that. At some point in the SU level, we'll have to elect someone to cast the vote on the resolutions for our SU, which I kind of did at the last minute last year because we don't have representatives. So at the next, I've asked Carrie to put that on the next SU meeting to elect someone to cast a ballot so that we have to know what the resolutions are, take a quick glance, and then the board has a recommendation so you can lobby the representative to that meeting. We can discuss and figure out how we want them to vote. So after we put it out all to the boards and then kind of had consensus, and I cast the vote as to what the board wanted. It wasn't me, I was casting the vote for the whole SU. And if anyone wants to go, we should think about sharing rides, because I think I will go. Yes, you want to add to that?
Other business, could we get a copy of the inserted schedule to know what's going on next week? Because I'd like to, it's a chance to get around to different buildings.
Great idea.
And the next agenda, board secretary.
I have that on my list.
Okay.
Can I give you my, oh, sorry, do you want that? I think I started keeping a list on that. Is there a list on the back of that? What do I do with it? Yeah, I'll put it back here. So for the next meeting, we're talking turf. I mean, not the next meeting is board retreat, but we're considering the turf again.
I also have another question, is like, when are leadership councils starting?
Where what?
When are leadership councils starting? Or are we supposed to discuss that again?
You know what, I'm wondering if we should do that on the board retreat and just kind of figure out a scheme for lining people out. Because we've talked back and forth about board representation, and I know the principals are starting to get community members, but I think that's a really good board retreat agenda item. It's sort of one nuts and bolts topic to get that off the ground. There's something else that I have on the agenda that I can't find my notes, but I will send it around. And I will try and send around the agenda. I've had to do them very quickly because of vacation time, so I'll try and send them around as I've done in the past and let people tell me if they need any asks. Anything else for the next agenda? Anything else for this meeting? I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, there being no further business before this vote, I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Ann Beekman. Is there a second on that motion? Thank you, Thomas. All those in favor? Any abstentions? The ayes have it, and we are adjourned.